Angular Material gives us some awesome user interface elements, and the one we'll use for our user input will be the Sidenav. In this lecture, we'll see how to put the Sidenav in place and how to add a form to it. The next step that we'll cover is how to create data. And generally, anytime that we want to create data, we are going to need to take some user input. And for that, we'll need a form. Now, we could just stick our form anywhere here on the page, and we could maybe put it up at the top and perhaps even have a box that can be opened with a toggle button. But Angular Material provides some really nice UI features that we can make use of. All right, so let's take a look at the Angular Material website here. I really like this Sidenav UI feature. So you can toggle a Sidenav open and closed, and this would be a really cool place to put a form for the user to submit their data. All right, so let's get the HTML in place for this first. So back over here within Sublime Text, let's go to our index.html file, and we'll come down below the main toolbar, and let's call for an MD Sidenav. And then within that Sidenav, we'll actually put a toolbar up at the top. Because if we take a look here, this part here is actually itself a toolbar. So let's do MD toolbar. All right, then within the toolbar, we can put maybe an H1 for the title. And this H1 should have a class of MD toolbar tools. And then for now, we can just put add a classified. And we should also add some class names here to our main MD Sidenav element. So let's say we want a class name of MD Sidenav left, and we'll also give it a class of MD whiteframe, and then Z2. And that whiteframe class controls the depth of the shadow that shows up beneath the sidebar. So over here back at the NG Material site, we can see there's a bit of a shadow showing up on the sidebar. And if we use a different Z value in the class name, then we can get a different depth. And then we will also give it a component ID. So we use MD component ID, and we'll just call it left. That's what they use in the demo, and that's fine for our purposes too. All right, so if we were to save this and go to check it out in the browser, what we see is nothing. The Sidenav isn't actually showing up at all. And the reason for this is that the Sidenav is actually controlled by some JavaScript to open and close it. But just to get a sense for what it kind of looks like for now, what we can do is use another attribute called MD_is_locked_open. And MD_is_locked_open is going to take a Boolean value. In this case, we'll just pass true. And this is another one of those cases where we could put some kind of expression here into MD_is_locked_open, and whether or not the sidebar is locked open is determined by the result of that expression. So probably right away you'll notice here that the sidebar doesn't look a whole lot like what we saw over in the demo. In the demo, when we open the sidebar, it takes up the full height of the page, and then we've got this black sort of mask that sits over the rest of the content. And the reason for this is that we actually need some JavaScript to properly open and close the sidebar and have it take its full effect. So let's do that now, and just before we do though, I am going to add in the form for our Sidenav here. So we need to add in another section. Let's do MD content. And in this case, let's give it some padding. So if we use layout padding, that's going to just give a little bit of padding around everything that's inside of this MD content area. And I'm actually just going to paste in this form. The reason is that it's a little bit long and would take a bit long to type out. So I'll let you copy everything you see here, and then we'll add a little bit more to it as we go. So once you've had the chance to copy that down, let's actually just look at our site again to see how it turns out. All right, so if we take a look, we've got our title, our price, description, and image link fields, and then some controls down here. And we're going to modify everything here a little bit so that it's going to eventually look a little bit different. But what we want to do first is just make sure that we can get the sidebar opening and closing properly. And the way that we want to have this controlled from a user perspective is when the new classified button is clicked, the Sidenav will be opened up. And for that, we can attach something to the ngClick event on this button. So let's head back over here to Sublime, and let's find that button. Here we go, new classified. And if we put onto this new classified button an ngClick that points to a method, then we can put in some JavaScript that will open up the Sidenav. So let's just shim this in. We haven't created this method yet, but we will in a second. And we'll shim this in as open sidebar. And we put in our parentheses here because this is a method that we want to call once the button is clicked. Back here in our controller, we now need to put in that open sidebar method on scope. And so in much the same way that we could do something like scope.message, which is a property on scope equals hello, we can actually attach a function to this as well, which will become a method that's called in our view. So in this case, we say open sidebar. And open sidebar is equal to a function. And here is the body of that function where we describe anything we want to happen once that button is clicked. And obviously what we want to happen is for the sidebar to be open. So how do we do this? Well, Angular Material gives us services for many of its different features. And the service that we need in this case is called MD Sidenav. So we can inject that here. Let's just put it beside our classifieds factory. And it's called MD Sidenav. And so this is a service provided by the Angular Material library that lets us tap into different functions of the Sidenav. And all we need to do is call for it to be open. So MD Sidenav. So on MD Sidenav, we need to identify which sidenav we want to control. And in this case, we've identified ours as being called left. If you remember over here in the HTML, our MD component ID is left. So that's how we control specific sidenavs. And in this case, we just want to call the open method on this. So the sidenav with a component ID of left has the open method called on it, and that should control the opening of our sidenav. Let's check this out in the browser to see if it's working. So we'll refresh. And really quickly, what we need to do is actually remove this MD is locked open attribute, because that right now is just keeping the sidenav open. So let's check this out again. If we refresh and if we click New Classified, there it is. Everything's opening up when we click it. And if we're to click away, what we see is that the sidenav closes. We also, though, want to be able to close the sidenav when we click the Cancel button. And right now we don't have a method for that, but we can set that up too. So let's check that out. Back over here in Sublime, you can probably guess kind of the workflow right now. We're going to mimic things that we've already done. We'll actually just take this ng click and we'll copy it down over here to our cancel button. So on this button, we want to attach a click, and instead of opening the sidebar in this case, we want to close the sidebar. In our controller, let's set something up much like this. It's going to be almost the same, but it will close the sidebar in this case. And we'll call close here. All right, let's see if that works now. So back over here in the browser, we open the sidenav and we can also close it just fine. All right, so that covers the HTML that we need to add in new classified listings, but we don't actually have the logic in place to add them to our data set yet. So we're going to do that in the next video.